Welcome to Powered by Instinct, a podcast for professionals who think about how your fundamental nature drives performance. In each episode, Kolbe experts will interview top performers, team leaders, consultants, and coaches to discuss identifying team members' strengths, aligning those strengths with their jobs, and optimizing individual and team performance. If you're interested in getting more done more naturally, then let's jump in.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Powered by Instinct. I'm Stephanie Clergé, VP of Training and Consulting here at Kolbe Corp, and my Kolbe result is 8363. Today's episode is all about how can we create an engaged culture and how Kolbe concept can help. And I am so excited today because I am here with Amy Bruske, Kolbe Corp's president, and she and I work together on a daily basis. But we don't always get a chance to stop and have some of these conversations about what goes on in our own organization and about some of the clients that we work with. So, hi, Amy. Thanks for being here.
Hi. I'm glad to be here. Actually, if we do have these conversations there at 7, 8, 9 p.m. when everybody leaves the office, then we stay and have these really fun conversations.
That is definitely true. So, before we get going, do you mind just reminding everybody what's your MO? What's your Colby result?
My Colby result is a 3583 for those of you watching. I've got a little visual here and very complimentary to yours, Stephanie.
Yeah, yes, I love that we have those complementary strengths. It's fantastic to get to work together. So, kind of getting us started here, I'm just interested in, as I said, the topic is really all about an engaged culture. So, what does an engaged culture mean kind of from your perspective? And then maybe we'll talk about, some challenges that, leaders and others in organizations faced and give a little bit of guidance from our experience and our knowledge about Colby. But let's just start with that fundamental question. What are the key elements or what does an engaged culture mean?
Gosh, and this is kind of a tricky question because as some of you know, we're reading a lot in the people space out there. Companies have been spending millions of dollars for a very long time to increase engagement. And if you look at the Gallup surveys that are out there, we haven't moved the needle very much, which is fascinating. But here's what we do know, and this is what we see, is if you have people who are engaged in their own individual roles and where there's a fit in the organization, so they're a great fit for the culture of the org and they're a fit for their job, they love their job. That person will love their job and engagement automatically goes up. And those are the people you want to build the future on. So an engaged culture is one where everyone's firing on all cylinders, where they're contributing at high levels, where there is some level of teamwork and knowing who should be doing what. So those kinds of things are factors that I think are hard to measure. But if we can focus a lot more on that and a lot less on, buying fun stuff and really great outings and bringing your dog to work and all of the things that sound like great perks, but don't necessarily move the needle.
So you're saying no margarita bar at Colby Corp anytime soon? That
Well,
sounds
no, I'm not saying that. I think those are great add-ons, but as we know, people don't stick around organizations like that if the rest isn't in play. Yeah. What are you saying? What else would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those other perks are important. Obviously, people's compensation and benefits, and you have to look at all of those types of things. But yeah, we have to look at what are people doing in their day-to-day job, right? What are you doing, whether you're in the office or whether you're, now working from home or a coffee shop or wherever, your office might be on a given day. It's those tasks and the people and that energy there that really does matter. Where do you think is a good place for organizations to start when they're thinking about creating an engaged culture?
You really have to start at thinking about people's strengths. So if you've got this human resource, it's available to you. And I'm talking about people loving their jobs means that they've got to be in the zone every day. So really looking at individual strengths and how can we capitalize on those. I mean, that's where I think we really start. So people dabble in assessments, like they will say, oh, I'm going to do these assessments. It'll be really fun. And it is interesting or it is helpful, but they stop there at just identifying strengths. So we have to go beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's one of the things that I see too is, that identification step is so critical. But you also kind of, even just staying there, you have to dig deeper and understand not just here's what my strengths are, but how do I use them at a daily basis? Do I get a chance to use these strengths at work? What do they look like? Can I communicate some of those contributions to other individuals that I work with so that they know what I do best and what they can count on me for? So yeah, it's a process that goes much deeper than just, yay, I have my numbers and I'm ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the reasons that we developed a framework. And I think it's been years in the making, but we've developed a framework called the Kolbe system, where we really said we know identifying strengths is really important. We have to identify strengths in all three parts of the mind, but there are other steps to the process. And it does start, just like you said, Stephanie, with identifying strengths. And for those of you that have visuals, I'll just give you you can go on our website and pull up our visual called the Kolbe system. And of course, it starts with identifying strengths of people, and it has to be a complete look. So I think one of the pitfalls is you might just have one part of the mind. So just a reminder for our listeners, there are three different parts of the mind, and you have strengths in all three. So there's your thinking or your cognitive part of the mind, and that's just what are you good at? What experience, knowledge, skills do you have that contributes? And then there's, of course, the personality or affect or the feeling part of the mind that has to do with what motivates you, what's your personality type, what do you prefer and what do you value. And so we've got to look at what do you like to do? That really is an enjoyable, what do you enjoy and what do you care about? And then the third part of the mind is what we're experts in here at Fulby, and that is how do you execute? So this cognitive part of the mind is how do you solve problems? And how do you most naturally get things done if totally free to be yourself? So when we're really identifying strengths, it goes beyond any one piece of it. It's looking at that complete piece of the puzzle. So that is step one.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's assume we've got our cool BA index, we know our strengths, we've actually delved deep into our strengths in all three parts of the mind. Then what?
So the next step is, of course, how am I going to work with other people well? So it is about optimizing strengths and for individuals and leaders to think about who should be working together on what. So sometimes there's just over collaboration. Everybody's in the meeting together when not everyone has to be there. Sometimes two people are working together to solve a problem because of who they are in the organization or what their function is. But we haven't really thought about what are the ideal combination of strengths to get things done. And so optimizing strengths is about strategically collaborating and combining those strengths. And just a little bit of information makes a huge difference on identifying where's a team going to get stuck? Why do meetings go on too long? What are something, why are we missing goals? It's not just because people don't have the time or don't care. Oftentimes we've got the wrong people collaborating and working together.
Absolutely. Well, and that's what I love about Colby, is because it's not about just team builders, although I think learning about your strengths and the strengths of your team can be really fun, but it's about building your team and figuring out, what is it that this team has come together to get done, right? I mean, you have shared goals, as you said, there are certain results that you want. So, how are we going to get there? And do we have the right people doing the right things at the right time to really get those results that we're looking
Right.
for?
And really, when you think about team, if you understand each other's strengths, so obviously as a leader, it starts with getting together and making sure everyone understands each other's strengths. Then you know who you can count on to do what. And there that builds trust immediately. So what I know about you, Stephanie, is I can count on you to really do the details. And you will dig in depth and you will ask questions and you will ask people to justify when making decisions. So I don't have to check up on that. I know that you're automatically going to do that. And I also know you're not going to guess because of your need to be an expert in something. You will be sure before you answer someone if they have a question. So if I say, hey, what happened in the past with this, or how are we handling these kinds of things? If you're answering me immediately and in a sure way, then I know I can trust that. I don't have to check up on that. Well, that makes a team work together so much more effectively because now I don't have to take it personally when someone is pushing back about a method to problem solving. So I love the difference between thinking about relationship conflict. A lot of times, yeah, in the workplace, we need to have shared values. So we should not have relationship conflict where we're disagreeing on what does the end result look like. But it is actually really healthy to have a diversity of strengths on a team and have what's kind of called task conflict, where we might disagree on how we're going to approach getting to the same end result. So as leaders, we really have to think that through and be able to identify it and actually encourage diversity in problem solving and the way that we think about things.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I'm glad that that eight and fact finder is helpful to you because I will for sure tell you. I'll say things like I'm 85% sure about that, but let me go double check. Right? I'm not. You're right. I'm not just gonna make it up. And what I love about working with you on a team is, in addition to simplifying all of the facts and the details that I have, really getting it down to a key message or a bottom line. But also, I know I can come to you for alternatives, right? If I'm looking for what are some other ways, right? We can kind of have like a little just quick brainstorming session and figure out what are some other ways of getting things done. And so, as we expand that to our broader team, it's amazing to be able to go person by person and know I can go to this person for this, or I could go to this person for that, or we want to pull an ad hoc team together. Sometimes I think people really focus on this optimized step as this is just my intact team. These are the people who report and have this reporting structure. But it's also about, some of those, we're just going to pull together a project team or we're going to pull together a few people just to get this one task done and really looking at optimizing some of those ad hoc teams as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lots of great applications there. All right. So then let's kind of move on and figure out what does it look like in this next step in the Colby system?
Right. So the next step is alignment. That is really about making sure that someone is in a role where they get to use their strengths every day and thinking about to what degree are you getting the freedom to be yourself? Because I think there's this huge misperception that just because we're capable of doing something, we should do more of that. And what you find along the way is you may have great skills. Some of you have developed these amazing careers where you have a lot of skills and, experience in certain areas, and yet you're taking on a lot of tasks that aren't necessarily a great fit for your natural way of getting things done. So the align step is where what I love is this is where we go beyond regular assessments. So there are typical assessments that give you an understanding of what are your strengths. And by the way, most of those tests out there are personality type tests, but they're just telling you one piece of the puzzle, and that's here's who you are. But the next step is do you actually get to be that on a daily basis? So when I talked about it, engagement in the beginning, I said people who love their jobs, those are the people that stick around and they contribute at a higher level. And here's the reason all of our research shows that if someone is working against what is natural for them, it increases stress, levels of stress. And eventually, if left unmanaged, that's when someone's going to burn out. That's when they're going to quit your organization. And they don't always know why the stress is there, but the more aligned people are to the role and what the needs are, we find those are the most engaged employees. So here's what that looks like. There's a process to this. We already know that we know someone's strengths. Well, now we're going to do a quick job analysis. You, as the job holder, how do you see that the role needs to be done? So we have a quick assessment called the Kolbe B Index that does that for you. And you basically say, how do I think I need to operate on a daily basis to be successful? When we're comparing who I am to how I view I need to operate on my job, then we can see where there's some potential disconnect. We can do something with that. We can start giving you strategies around that. And a third piece of this, and this is where the real magic comes in, is how are external requirements that are being put on you? How do other people want you to get the job done? And so that might be an additional level of stress that we haven't considered either. So if you can see the job holder's perception and an outsider, which, most of the time is a leader, right? So we want to know what does a leader expect as far as how you execute. We take that, put that all together and see where some of the potential disconnect is. And then we have some really simple strategies for minimizing how much of the time you're working against your grain. And so, we always tell people delegate. Hey, delegate away whatever is not natural for you. But I don't think we do a very good job of helping them understand really what they should be delegating and where they should get help. So, Stephanie, I mean, you're an expert in this area. You do some of the best coaching I've ever seen on what do we do where there are tasks that are not a fit for me. This does not mean everybody, someone needs to be fired or you can't be in that role or I mean, along the way, sure, that is the reality. There are times when people all of a sudden get a sense of not only their strengths, but what the job requires. And they realize that it's probably not a good long term fit. But most of the time, we just give them some quick coaching and it makes a big difference, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to circle back to something you said earlier on about capable. And I call that the curse of the capable, right? You're smart, you're motivated, and you're ready to do stuff, but you can do a lot of different things, right? Colby doesn't tell you what you can do, just how you get that done. And so when you can do so many different things, sometimes you do them whether those things are a good fit for you or not. And so
Right.
that's why having some of these, extra solutions to kind of help you getting the Colby B index and seeing, where helping having it to help pinpoint where you might have stress in your job is so critical. Actually, I wanted to tell a quick story about back when way before I came to Colby, and I'm actually an engineer by trade. Some people know me know that. And I had this job where I was managing engineers and other technical folks. And there were some parts of that that I really, really loved. But there was one part of it which was very systematized. You were supposed to go into the place where I was and you were supposed to follow these exact steps every single day. And that part was so draining for me. I remember sitting in meetings. Literally, I would take extra pieces of paper because, I'm dating myself now, but before we did everything online, and I would literally have a list of things to do and what I would do in the future, what I would do when I get out of this meeting, and my grocery list, anything that would literally keep me sane when I was in these meetings where we were just following the same step by step by step, 3 meetings a day, doing the same thing over and over again. And some people just thrived in that environment. And honestly, I thought that I was a little bit crazy because I would look around and I would say, oh, wow, everybody else thinks this is the thing. And I wish somebody had come into the organization, come into my team at that time and said, not only, hey, Stephanie, here are your strengths, which I feel like I probably had a pretty good handle on, but also said, here's the job. And the job is this. Here's how you see it, which would be our Colby B. And here's how the management sees it. And I would have immediately recognized that there were some things about that job that weren't a good fit.
Yeah.
Instead, I had to live through that pain of having to deal with that situation.
Right. And people feel so guilty when it's like, I'm capable of this. What's wrong with me? Same thing with the stuff you procrastinate, right? You are all mostly procrastinating on things that just aren't a great fit for you. And then we feel guilty about it. It's like, we got to figure out. I do love the Dan Sullivan says procrastination. I can't remember exactly how he says it, but in his book, Who Not How, he talks a lot about when you're procrastinating something, it's a good signal for you that you got to figure out either who can help you with it or take it on or whatever it might be. So I understand that not all roles we have a lot of freedom or help or the ability to delegate, but there are ways that you can just change the way you get the same thing done sometimes in a way that's a little more complementary to your strengths. But if you're watching how everybody else does things, or you have a mentor that maybe gets things done in a very different way, you maybe haven't opened up your mindset to that. So we can help. I want you all to focus on what's one task that drives you crazy and think of one different way that you can do it, because it's the little things that make a big difference. Little things. Like for me, my email. Oh my gosh, email. Why is email so hard? Email is so simple, but it is so draining. So anyway, that's for another podcast when we can talk to you guys about strategies for working against your brain. But that's the aligned step.
Yeah, it's so critical to really bump the what you know about your strengths up against your job requirements, both your perception of the job and those who are rewarding you for it, right? How valuable is the information to have about the people who are rewarding you for results to know what their perspective is on the job? I just think
Yeah.
it's priceless information.
And as a leader, can you imagine that, your rock stars, the ones who are doing really well, are sometimes so stressed and you don't even know this. So to be able to pinpoint ahead of time, gosh, there's a little bit of an alignment issue in this area and we can do something about it. You're being able to predict when someone's going to be stressed long term. So if you don't want to wake up one day and all of a sudden this superstar doesn't want to be in this role anymore or quits your organization, you have no idea why. So it really is critical. They're not going to complain, by the way. You know how this is. The rock stars don't complain. They just work harder. And that's not sustainable over time.
Yeah. Well, and then the other side of that is the people who don't quit or don't burn out and they just stay, right? The whole quit and stay. So kind of
Oh,
bringing it back around to
yeah.
engagement, right? There's so many things that could happen, right? You can have, as you said, those superstars that suffer from that curse of the capable and they just keep going until they burn out or until their results suffer. Then there's the ones who are, who actually leave the organization. And then they're the ones that quit and stay, who are, the ones who are really dragging down engagement. And then they start to not only be a problem for themselves, but a problem for other people around them. 'Cause other people have to pick up the slack. And so,
That's the worst scenario. You have someone who's completely not just not engaged, but being negative or whatever we might be
yeah,
going. affecting other people. Yeah, we do not want to do that. That is one of the things that can start very much in a simple way and long term turn into something that affects everyone. Yeah.
For sure. All right. So we have one more focus area left, and that's really growing your team, right? So what does it look like to grow your team using Colby?
Yeah, so the very last step is of course just adding to your team. I mean that is all about when you have to grow the team, when you have to replace someone, how can you expand your organization with the right people? And so going through a process up front of helping you really pinpoint what do you need in this job is going to prevent so many problems later on. So what you're able to do is use a simple process and first say, how do I need this job done? So once you can evaluate that, you're most of the way there. And what's great is if you have a role that's a replicated job, so you already have a bunch of people in the role, we can really help you then because we can look at the strengths of the people in the job, who are doing really, really well, who are your A players, who are kind of struggling, see where there's some similarities or differences, and then we can make sure to help you replicate that. But you identify what's going on first and what you need. You look at the job requirements, and then you're able to also do some matching for a direct supervisor. So we can look at compatibility with a supervisor too, get you what you need on how to execute, but also look at the direct leader. And then you've got this range, which is kind of this profile, an ideal profile. What do you need in a candidate? And from there, you can rate candidates, right? So you have candidates take the Kolbe A index and we can rank them against this profile and rate them for you. And one of the things that this process does for you is make sure that it saves you tons of time and money on what's really expensive, and that's the interview. We all know the interview part of the process, you're going to take some leaders in the organization whose time is very valuable, and you're going to spend a lot of time interviewing people who aren't necessarily ever going to execute in the way that you need done. So, engagement, I mean, in a way, when you think about it, engagement starts with that. It starts with getting the right people in the right seats to begin with versus working really, really hard to engage the people that are there. So if we can focus on what happens before we even hire someone, then you're already going to be ahead in focusing on an engaged culture.
Yeah, no, I love that tie back to engagement. I think it's so critical to think of your hiring process as the engagement process. And I know even, for us, who we've been doing some hiring lately, we've also found that, giving people the opportunity to understand a little bit about their strengths in the interview actually strengthens our employer brand as well. And so it keeps candidates engaged in the process, knowing that they're kind of getting something of value and getting to learn something about themselves. And so even if they end up not moving all the way through the interview process, we've given them that gift of strengths. And, that's an interesting form of candidate engagement as well.
Mhm. Well, and it's funny that we're kind of ending on this last step. And sometimes we really do think about the four components of the Colby system in the order that we just went in, but it's all, you could start anywhere. You can certainly start with hiring, right?
Yeah. Well, and if you are thinking of it as a circle, sometimes I like to think it circles back again because you
Yeah.
hire. And then the next thing you do is make sure that those people who you have hired understand their strengths and identify ways to really help
Right.
onboard well. So it certainly, can be one big circle, but you can sort of enter from any point. People who already know their strengths, who want to get that job alignment piece really dialed in, people who know their strengths but want to start to move forward in terms of hiring or, getting the right team together, or your intact team, but you're looking at the ad hoc team. So definitely that's why we like to think of them as components or focus areas versus steps. But, I think naturally we sort of say step one, step two, but you can kind of make your way around and back again.
Yeah. And when you think about it, what we're really trying to do is have a more complete solution to all of your people problems, because really all of the people problems we just mentioned is falling into one of these areas. We know that the people part of the business is what keeps leaders up at night. I think for yourself, any of you that are out there. And we know that if you tap into what the strengths are first and then build from there, you've got a winning combination.
Absolutely. Well, there is so much to talk about, and I hope we get a chance to continue the conversation. I want to talk to you a little bit more at some other point about what you touched on with cognitive trust earlier. I think that's a topic we could explore
Oh,
for
yeah,
quite
that would be
a while.
fun.
Yeah, but maybe we should take a minute and kind of recap some of what we said. So, sort of, this is the eight fact finder trying to simplify here. So, you might need to jump in and jump in and help me. But the first thing we want to know is, do you have an A for everybody? Right? Do you have the strengths of everyone on the team? And so, if you can answer that question, then you've done at least the first step in identifying. Then you want to kind of dig deeper into that. Then you want to know, is your team optimized to use these strengths effectively? Not enough to have a bunch of individuals who sort of know their strengths. It's what happens when you combine them, and how do you combine them for the best possible performance and the best possible result? Then, how are people aligned to their role? Is each and every person in a role that's a good fit, getting down to that task level, right? So not just sort of saying, well, in general, they're fine. They seem to be okay in their role, but are the tasks that they're doing on a daily basis keeping them engaged? And not just do they like them or do they have the skills for them? Because I spent years doing a job that I absolutely had the skills for, and there were definitely parts of it that I liked, but it just wasn't a good fit in terms of how I naturally execute or how I naturally take action. And then the last one is all about hiring. And, do you have a good process for hiring that includes all three parts of the mind, but really that saves you time and energy and, of course, money too, by making sure that you're looking at that cognitive piece and looking at that early on before you do the expensive part of hiring. So, did I
Right.
miss anything there?
I think that's everything. And I know as I'm listening to you play back the four different components, it may sound like a lot, but
Mhm.
it is not something that has to be done all at once. So you start with some simple steps, and it really is a focus on understanding that engagement matters, that the more you can get people aligned with their strengths, the right people, right jobs, but also teams together that are really thriving and collaborating in a way that's really effective, you're going to have this engaged organization that absolutely is poised for growth, and you're going to attract more people that you need to be in that organization. It feeds on itself. It absolutely is worth it. So you can start with some of the basics and then build from there. And then you are going to see a difference in engagement. I mean, there is no doubt about it. You'll see the difference between someone who is kind of in the zone and someone who isn't. It is very obvious from the outside. But anyway, we can help simplify it for you. So I know it sounds like they're the four components. This is something that you absolutely can do over time. And the solutions that we have are really, they're very simple and straightforward. And you can either work with us or with consultants on these. So you have lots of choices on how to get them done.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you talked about, because it can seem overwhelming. We live this and breathe this every day. And so it's like, tick, 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 tick. Here's kind of the four focus areas that sometimes it can seem overwhelming. So, yeah, start where you are and go deeper over time and figure out, what can you really do to keep teams, engaged. And, I should have probably started with this, but I like thinking about engagement almost like real life, right? For those of us who are married or maybe have been married in the past, right? It's just that fit, right? It's like, oh my goodness, I am energized and excited not to be with the person like you would in a relationship, but excited about your work and excited about the job and
Yeah.
excited about that freedom to be yourself. It is such a difference to have a job that really does use your strengths maximized, right? Instead of, maybe a little bit here and a little bit there, but not really getting a chance to do that. So that's what I love.
Yeah. And I should add, Stephanie, I don't think we made this point explicitly. This is any sized organization. So
Mm,
those of you that have a team of five, all of these things can be applied to small teams or groups or an entrepreneurial firm or to major corporations, government agencies. So this is not something that is just for larger teams or organizations. Absolutely, any size team can benefit.
absolutely. Well, great. All right. Well, as always, the best place to start with this is making sure that you've taken your Colby Index. So if you haven't done that, or if you've done that part, but you want to know more about the Colby system, I would definitely encourage you to go to Colby.com, where you can do both of those things and learn a lot more about the Colby concept as well as some of the solutions. And you can also find a list of Colby certified consultants, these experts that we train. So if you're interested in working with an expert near you, you can go online and find that list as well. But I want to wrap up here by saying thank you once again, Amy. It's been really fun to get a chance to talk, and I look forward to doing it again sometime soon. And if there's other topics that you are interested in hearing from us or some of our other Colby experts, I hope you will also give us some feedback as well.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Please share your ideas for podcasts with us. We would love that. Thank you for saying that, Stephanie. Yeah, thanks. It was
Absolutely.
fun.
All right. Well, see you guys next time on Powered by Instinct.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Powered by Instinct. This show is brought to you by Kolbe Corp, a company that helps leaders and organizations thrive using the only instinctive strengths assessment on the market. If you enjoyed this episode, then follow Powered by Instinct wherever you get your favorite podcasts, or join us online at kolbe.com/podcast for all the latest episodes.